Our feathers okay. I'm a little short on hair.
When you see Chuck E. Cheese will sing and play his games, you'll jump and shout and dance about 'cause Chucky knows the way. The games will ring, the games will buzz, excitement's in the air. The bells will clang, the sirens sound, and you'll be glad you're there. Chuck E. Cheese's, Chuck E. Cheese's, Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater. Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater.
There's a Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater near you.
Chuck E. Cheese's, known as the place where a kid can be a kid, has been a part of nearly everyone's childhood, including me. This popular pizza chain is best known for many things like pizza and arcade games, but one thing that CEC is most known for is their colorful cast of characters like Chuck E. Cheese himself. However, this video is not about him. Instead, it's about one of the many side characters, that being the leading lady of the gang, Helen Henny. This larger-than-life chicken has been with the company since almost the beginning, appearing in numerous places around each restaurant, whether that is in the form of an animatronic, a costumed character, a poster, or merchandise. But what many people may not know is how many different versions of the Helen character have existed throughout the almost 50 years she's been around. So in this video, I'm going to go over the entire history of Helen, going over not just her mascot suits and animatronics, but also her general character design and personality. So after several delays, I can finally say, this is the history of Helen Henny from Chuck E. Cheese. Before I go over the history of Helen, I recommend you guys watch my history video on Chuck E. Cheese first. I go a little more in-depth with the development of CEC there, but if you haven't seen it, then check it out after this video. But for now, let me summarize the events that came before the creation of Helen, aka the creation of Pizza Time Theater. So the creation of CEC began when Atari founder Nolan Bushnell, who also went on to create CEC, bought a quote-unquote coyote costume at the IAAPA Expo. But when he received the costume, it was actually a rat costume, not a coyote. Bushnell rolled with it anyways and themed the restaurant after the rat, and that's when Chuck E. Cheese was born. However, Bushnell didn't just want a pizza restaurant with an arcade. He wanted something more. Some entertainment. But what kind of entertainment? Well, he remembered how much he wanted to work for Disney, and came up with a great idea. Why not use animatronics? But then came a problem. There was no way Chucky could do a whole show by himself. At least not yet. He needed some friends, or at least some other characters to work off of. I mean, Ronald McDonald has friends, and so does Mickey Mouse, so why not Chuck E. Cheese? That's when Gene Landrum, Atari's consumer division president, who had also been made the general manager of Pizza Time Theater, along with Atari advertising firm Robert Allen Black, came up with a bunch of new characters to go with Chucky. They created a chef named Pasquale, a cat named Krusty, a dog named Billy Banjo Boggs, later renamed to Jasper T. Jowls, and a group of singing crows called the Warblettes. Absent from this initial gang of characters was Miss Helen Henny herself, but thankfully she wouldn't have to wait too long. Finally, after years of planning and designing, Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater held its grand opening in San Jose, California on May 17, 1977. In the next chapter, I will go over Helen Henny's debut and history in the early Pizza Time Theater era, including more info about her character, as well as the animatronics and voice actors. So during the development of Pizza Time Theater, everyone at Atari came up with the idea of having guest characters in the animatronic shows. Some of the original guest characters considered included Glenn Campbell and Elkton John. However, the first of these guests would end up being none other than Helen Henny, who debuted at the original San Jose location on August 12, 1977, just 3 months after the opening. Helen was known as the Hollywood Chicken and was loosely based off real-life Australian actress and singer Helen Reddy, hence the name Helen Henny. We don't know too much about her original version since most of her show tapes are lost media, but we do know Helen was a singer that came to perform at Pizza Time Theatre fresh off a touring show in Madagascar. The original design of Helen was much different compared to the design that we know of today. This Helen, despite being a chicken, looked a lot more like a goose, mostly due to her having a long neck. Helen also had white feathers, brown eyes, and long brown hair. She also wore a black necklace, and while it's hard to see, she's wearing a white shirt with a purple vest. One weird thing about this original Helen is that she has yellow hands with red fingernails. I guess those are supposed to be her talons. And finally, along with singing, she also played a small guitar. Of course, since Helen was a singer, she had to have a voice actor. Now, while writing this script, there was a ton of discourse over who Pizza Time Theater's Helen's voice actor really was. You see, it's commonly believed that Helen's original voice actor was Paula Mulcahy. However, a fellow CEC historian got into contact with Robert Black, who helped cast the Chuck E. Cheese characters, and he said something completely different. It was mentioned that Nancy Lenehan was actually the original voice in the 70s. There's been a bunch of discussion over this, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to believe that Nancy was the original Helen's voice actress for Pizza Time Theater.
And the roosters on a heavenly high, when I show them my feathery thighs. Helen Henny's on top of the Hollywood chicken coop.
On a related note, did you know the former voice of Minnie Mouse, the late great Russi Taylor, actually auditioned to be Helen's voice actor? It supposedly happened during the Pizza Time Theater era. Along with that, Lola Bowers, B.J. Ward, and another unidentified actress also at some point in time auditioned for Helen Henny.
Well, hello, Henny. This is Henny. Hi, it's me, Broadway Helen Henny, the star of hit shows like The Chicken a la King and I.
Now, Helen couldn't just have a voice and nothing else. She had to be at the restaurant in the flesh. That's right, it's time to talk about the animatronics. So the original Helen animatronic, like the rest of the Pizza Time players, was made by Harold Gold-Branson and the team at Fantasy Forest. This animatronic was referred to as the Portrait Bot, due to her being stuck to the wall of the restaurant with a frame around her. The Helen animatronic looked pretty much identical to how I just mentioned her earlier, with the same goose-looking design. Unlike the Helen animatronics of today, this bot was way more homemade since its movements were very simple and was controlled more like a large puppet. With that being said, since Helen was added after all the other characters, her animatronic was a bit more advanced but not by much. Also, while researching, I found a really creepy story about this Helen bot, where during a kid's birthday party, her head fell off and rolled under a table, traumatizing many children. This Helen animatronic would go on to be used at the original San Jose Winchester location for the remainder of 1977, before being retired in February 1978 and replaced by the next CEC guest star, Madame Oink. However, this wouldn't be the end of Helen completely. Fast forward to December 2nd, 1978, when the second Pizza Time Theater opened on Cooser Road, also in San Jose. Among everything featured at the location, it also included a new set of portrait bots, including the return of Miss Helen herself. This Helen animatronic looks nearly identical to the previous Winchester Helen. In fact, some people believe that it's actually the same bot, just recycled for the new location. However, this has never been confirmed. Honestly, I think they might be the same, since I literally can't see any differences between the two of them. Cooser Helen would remain for a bit longer than the Winchester Helen did, retiring around 1980. Her current status is unknown, but she most likely was sent to the Pizza Time Theater corporate office in Sunnyvale, California after retiring, and was probably destroyed when the office was relocated to Texas. This would also become the last quote-unquote homemade animatronic for Helen, since after 1979, they would be phased out in favor of new bots. The next few locations that opened in 1979 featured a new style of animatronics we know as the Cyberamics, back then known as the Ottoman bots. These guys were notable for being much larger and less realistic. Helen didn't initially receive an Ottoman bot, but later that same year she would receive something even better, a cabaret bot. So beginning in 1978, Pizza Time Theater introduced a new section of their restaurants known as the cabaret, or lounge depending on the location. This would be a separate room away from the main dining showroom with its own seating and animatronic. In this case, it's Helen. Helen is actually the only Chuck E. Cheese character to have performed on the main stage and the cabaret. This Helen no longer looks like a goose, but still doesn't quite look like a chicken. Honestly, she looks more like an eagle, but we're getting closer to a chicken design. This design is somewhat similar to the other designs with the same long but now more curly brown hair, and she still plays a guitar, but now she has a full body and now wears a blue dress with yellow or orange legs and cowboy boots. Character-wise, Helen remained the same as before, still being the Hollywood Chicken, and now working for a fictional movie studio called Egg Stravaganza Motion Pictures. As of today, only 2 locations are confirmed to have had this Helen animatronic, those being the Huntington Beach, California location and the original Citrus Heights, California location. It's unclear if any other stores had this Helen. So that's pretty much it for Helen in terms of the early Pizza Time Theater years. The Cabaret Helen animatronic would be retired in 1980 and replaced by other brand new cabaret and lounge characters, although it's possible one of the Helen cabaret acts could have lasted a bit longer after 1980. Helen Henny herself would then be retired also in 1980, but again this wouldn't be the end for Helen. In fact, we're just getting started. The famous Hollywood Chicken would soon return, but now as something a bit different than a Hollywood actor. Something a bit more musical.
You can be young. You can be old. You can be neat. You can be bold. Now at Chuck E. Cheese, you can be real cheesy.
A new Italian pizza recipe with tons of mozzarella.
You can be real choosy.
All kinds of toppings for a hungry fella.
You can be wiggly.
You can be giggly.
You can be a star.
You can eat from the bar.
You can be a man.
You could be a mouse.
You can be anything you want to be.
At Chuck E. Cheese, it's the only one.
When you're hungry for fun.
In June 1983, Pizza Time Theater made an announcement. They announced that after a 3-year hiatus, Helen Henny herself would be making a grand return to the restaurants for an all-new show. This time, Helen dropped the Hollywood Chicken angle, and now set her sights on the Great White Way, aka Broadway. She joined the Pizza Time Players in hopes of impressing a Broadway talent scout rumored to be in the audience. Soon after the announcement in June 1983, Helen would start to be reintroduced into stores with a new design, a new stage backdrop for existing balcony stages, new show tapes with a large emphasis on Broadway songs, and of course, a new animatronic. So going over her new design, Broadway Helen was meant to look much older than her previous design, and have a look and personality loosely based off Liza Minnelli. Helen's redesign was created by wardrobe supervisor Kathy Hopp and cosmetic designer Jewel Kamen. Initial concept art for the new Helen featured her with blonde hair with a protruding red chicken comb, along with an orange beak, a star-shaped mole, a feather boa, and a pink, red, and orange dress. Her final design kept the large red chicken comb, but now she has black and white feathery hair, shaped like an afro, along with a yellow beak with 2 red chicken wattles on each side and blue eyeshadow. Her wardrobe also changed to a red V-neck dress. Nancy Lenehan returned to reprise her role as Helen, but again there's other rumors that it could have been somebody else, but I and many others do believe it was Nancy. Helen's return was originally meant to be temporary like every other guest star character in years past. However, this would completely change later in 1983. During this time, Pizza Time Theater began to face some financial problems, so they had to make some changes, one of those being the discontinuing of rotating guest star characters. Instead, there would be one female character permanently a part of the Pizza Time Players. Originally, Madame Oink was going to be the permanent female character, but someone beat her to it, that someone being Helen. She was chosen because she was the most recent guest star and she was the most common guest star at many of the stores at the time. So Helen was now a full-time member of the Pizza Time Players, with Bandstand 1 being her first show as a permanent character. Just as Helen was starting to be reintroduced into restaurants, Pizza Time Theater began to face some more serious financial problems. They were spending too much on many things, including overexpansion, with new locations in order to compete with their competitor, Showbiz Pizza Place. Things only got worse when the video game crash of 1983 happened. In the following year, 1984, Pizza Time Theater was still struggling from all the money lost, so they made the difficult decision to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in mid-1984. Thankfully, this bankruptcy wouldn't last too long, as the company was purchased by Showbiz Pizza Place. The two companies remained separate at first, but beginning around the mid-80s, they merged into one company, Showbiz Pizza Time Incorporated. As for Helen, she wasn't badly affected. She pretty much remained the exact same as before. Everything was the same. Well, everything except her voice. I don't know why, but soon after the merger between Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza, they immediately decided to recast all the Pizza Time Players characters to have different voices. In April 1986, the show tape History of Rock and Roll was released, and this would be the introduction of a new voice for Helen. And for the longest time, there was tons of speculation over who was voicing Helen during this time, but recently we found out who it was. Beginning in 1986, Helen would now be voiced by Connie Nelson. Connie portrayed Helen similar to how she was previously portrayed, in a boisterous fashion with a bit of an ego, and she would also cluck. A lot. More than ever before now. She also often used different tones when voicing Helen throughout her time playing her.
Well, no, but lots of people did. They even wrote a song about it. Hey, Chucky, how about a romantic TV adventure like You Know Who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor?
Kids wake up in the morning light. Their faces are so happy and their smiles are so bright.
Around the late 80s, we finally saw a new Helen animatronic created. This time it was another full-body cyberamic which debuted on the stage known as the Rocker Stage. She was the exact same bot seen in the portrait and balcony stages, but now she's got legs, and a brand new red dress with flowers on it along with a bunch of glitter added to the character. Just like the previous stages, Helen was positioned to Chucky's left, but now she's sitting in a swinging porch chair that hangs from the top of the ceiling of the house. The swing would also move when Helen moves. Another stage known as the C stage was also created during this time. There's nothing too noteworthy about it since it's really just a balcony or portrait stage with a house facade. Helen would not be changed for these, at least not yet. There's one more thing to bring up during this portion of Helen's history that's pretty big. So throughout this video you may have noticed I left out something that all Pizza Time theaters had during this time. The walk-around costumed characters. Yep, while she had the animatronics and the occasional wall art, a Helen walk-around was never created. Why is that? Well, it's simple. Since Helen was meant to be a temporary character, the company never created a costume of her since, well, what's the point if the character was only temporary? But even when she became a permanent character, Helen still didn't have a costumed counterpart, though that would soon change. Sometime around the mid-80s after the Showbiz merger, a Helen costumed character would be created. There's not much information on this costume, and I could only find 2 photos of the costume, which is a shame because the costume is honestly really good. It's very accurate to the character art and the animatronic. Actually, I consider it to be the best version of Broadway Helen. There's nothing really that different about this costume other than her having a slightly different dress and black shoes instead of large yellow bird feet. The costume was created by Cowan Costumes, and was actually one of the very first costumes they made for Chuck E. Cheese's, which would spawn a partnership with the two companies that would last several decades. And that's it. That's all that's known about this costume. It's unclear if any locations used this costume, but it's been theorized that the costume was only used for corporate events and not the restaurants. And that's pretty much it for all the Helen-related things that happened in the Pizza Time Theater era. The character, animatronics, and artwork all stayed the same going into the late 80s, but if you're a Chuck E. Cheese fan, you can probably tell where this story is going. Behind the scenes, there was conflict between Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza, and at the end of it only one brand was left standing. And this would lead to even bigger changes for both the company and Helen.
Mom, I'm gonna take you out tonight. Let's go to Chuck E. Cheese, is our favorite place full of fun. Play games, it's gonna be great. I just wanna see a big smile on your face. Chuck E. Cheese's, where a kid can be a kid.
So in 1990, Showbiz Pizza Time Incorporated, the parent company of both Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza, was having trouble with getting the rights to the Showbiz Pizza band, the Rock-afire Explosion. So instead the company decided to revamp and convert all Showbiz Pizza places into Chuck E. Cheese's. This controversial move was called Concept Unification. Concept Unification meant that all the previous Showbiz Pizza artifacts, including the Rock-afire Explosion, would be recycled or in some cases destroyed and replaced with the Chuck E. Cheese brand and characters. In the case of Helen, the Rock-afire character Mitzi Mozzarella was repurposed into a new Helen Henny animatronic. You can watch the Concept Unification tapes on YouTube, but I will warn you, it could make you cry. However, while Helen would use Mitzi's mechanism on the official 3 stages, that wasn't always the plan. During the design phase, as well as on the actual prototype stage, Helen was originally going to use the mech that was used for Duke LaRue, the drummer, and she was going to play the keyboard, a role later given to Munch, while Mitzi's mech would be used for Chucky. However, none of this would be used on the actual stages used in the restaurants. Along with the company rebrand and the replacement of the Rock-afire Explosion, Helen would go through a huge redesign. Helen was actually the only character to completely change designs during the transition from the Pizza Time players to Munch's make-believe band. Her classic Pizza Time theater design, which was still being used up until this point, was officially retired, and Helen was given a more modern design. This is the design of Helen that would influence future designs of the character. This is the redesign that gave Helen her black top with a purple flower and collar. She also now is wearing a purple skirt, and finally she's got a pair of purple and white sneakers. Helen also got a new hairstyle. Gone is the big poofy afro-like hair. Now Helen has 2 pigtails with purple bows. It wasn't just her wardrobe that changed, but Helen herself got a facelift. She was made to look younger because the company felt Mitzi Mozzarella's marketability to young girls was a crucial part that needed to stay, and they hoped Helen would be just as marketable if made younger. The original Helen looked a bit too old and realistic for CEC, so they made her less chicken-like and more anthro. This included the removal of her red wattle and comb, along with a shortened and softened beak. She now also has green eyes. Personality-wise, she was largely the same as she was before the rebrand, but now she was made even smarter than before. Going back to the animatronics, I already kinda talked about the 3-stage Helen, but I didn't really go into specifics. If you remember my Jasper T. Giles video I did in 2023, I said I didn't like the original latex Jasper mask used on the 3-stage. Well, I have a similar opinion on the original Helen mask. However, unlike the Jasper mask, I find this one to be even worse. It is very creepy, and might actually be the creepiest CEC mask ever made. Her head is just so small, and her face is painted so weirdly that it makes it look scary. Some masks look alright, but a good chunk of them are complete nightmare fuel. As for older Pizza Time Theater Cyberamics, they weren't impacted too much by the change. In fact, some remained untouched even after Helen got redesigned, while others just changed out the mask and outfit. Also now all Chuck E. Cheese animatronic stages had televisions, so that the cartoon and costume counterparts could entertain people before or during a performance. Speaking of the costumes, something really weird happened towards the start of Concept Unification involving costumes. When Concept Unification started and the show tapes were being filmed, it introduced a new Helen walk-around costume, and this Helen was bizarre, as it featured a head similar to the 3-stage animatronic. This was really weird because while Chucky, Jasper, Munch, and Pasquale all did kinda look like their 3-stage counterparts, they had enough differences to make them unique and stand out from the bots. But with Helen, it literally looks like the animatronic just jumped off the stage and started dancing. Which maybe that's what they were going for? But still, it's just creepy. I don't find it to be as creepy as the 3-stage Helen, but it is still kinda creepy. But if you thought this Helen was bad, just wait, it gets worse. This Helen would be used throughout all of 1990, and then in 1991 the costume would be modified, but it honestly made it worse. They did change Helen's body to be less humanoid and more cartoon-like, but the head is just... oh god! Just look. It still uses a head based off the 3-stage bot, but now it looks even more terrifying with its larger hair and darker green around the eyes. Not to mention Helen's shocked look. This has to be one of the worst Chuck E. Cheese costumes ever made, and easily one of the creepiest. I really don't know why Chuck E. Cheese decided to make the Helen costume look like this, or why was it even greenlit? Though I do have a theory that maybe this was a prototype that was used last minute, while a much better costume was being created, as in this next Helen costume. Beginning around April or May of 1991, the finalized 90s Helen walk-around costume would debut. And yep, this one is a winner. They changed Helen's face to look less like the animatronic, and more like the 2D artwork, which was definitely the right choice. This costume is pretty much perfect, as it captures the character's personality and likeness so well. Helen has a much friendlier look with larger eyes with blue eyeshadow. Her beak is much rounder and happier, and her hair isn't as crazy looking, although this varies depending on the individual costumes. Her body remained mostly the same as before, with the same purple collar and skirt, but now her black top has her name stitched onto it. I think her shoes might be a little bigger too. It was also around 1991 that this Helen costume would start to be used at restaurant locations, making this the first Helen walk-around costume featured at the stores. This Helen costume, like the original 80s outfit, was also made by Cowan Costumes, and this particular Helen suit would go on to be the base for any Helen costumes to come after it, in terms of the head design. While the Helen mascot was used the most in the show tapes, there was another television exclusive version of Helen used, a puppet. Yep, this is where we get into the puppet era for CEC. And while I'm not really fond of the 90s puppets, I don't completely hate the Helen puppet. She's a bit unsettling due to the weird rubber-like faces of all the puppets have, but other than that I think she's fine. I actually like this Helen's face over the 3-stage one, mostly because it isn't completely nightmare fuel. The Helen puppet was mostly used in a skit called Helen Henny's Hollywood, where she would try to interview celebrities and hijinks ensue. While Helen herself was redesigned everywhere, her voice stayed mostly the same as it was before the rebrand. At the time in 1989, Connie Nelson from 1986 was still voicing Helen, but now she was starting to make Helen sound younger, to go along with her youthful redesign. However, everything would change in early 1991, when Helen received a new voice actress, that being Carlissa McKinney, who made Helen sound even more youthful than Connie did.
I'll tell you what I know. A constitution is a guarantee that we can be what we wanna be.
Shortly after Carlissa started voicing Helen, another voice actress was brought on to be the singing voice for Helen, that being Anna Gray LaBasse, or Labassie. I'm not entirely sure which one it is. Though I'll hold off on talking about her till later in the video. If you know, you know. But now we enter what many would call the Disney era for Chuck E. Cheese, since around this time, beginning in 1994, CEC partnered with Disney to produce the shows for their restaurants. With Disney in control now, Helen went through some changes, mainly involving different voice actresses taking over her. The timeline for these changes isn't as complex as, say, Jasper's voice during the Disney era, but there were two other Helen voice actors during this time. Carlissa McKinney and Anna Gray LaBasse would continue to provide the speaking and singing voices for Helen up until around January 1994. After that is when Disney took over and Helen got a new voice provided by Stephanie Nadoli, who gave Helen a voice similar to that of Anna Gray LaBasse's portrayal of the character.
comes to the show, these guys have nothing on me. I have everything covered from A to Z.
She would continue to voice Helen from April 1994 till around holiday 1995, and then again in April 1986. Around the same time, another actress, Kathy Turner, would start voicing Helen, and her take on the character is probably my least favorite voice for Helen. The voice she did sort of sounded like Carlissa's Helen voice, only much higher, younger, and even more cartoony.
Oh, Mr. Munch, I needed a lot more practice before I could be a real cheerleader.
Kathy would portray Helen in August 1995 and then again from January to April of 1996. Finally, in August 1996, both Carlissa McKinney and Anna Gray LaBasse would return to provide the singing and speaking voices for Helen, and would do so throughout the rest of the 1990s. One important thing I should mention is that during the Disney era of Chuck E. Cheese's, around 1995, Helen received another redesign. In an attempt to probably make Helen a bit more marketable to young girls, the company decided to go back to the past and borrow some elements from Mitzi Mozzarella's design. And by that, I mean Helen was now a cheerleader. In fact, just like Mitzi, Helen was given a green cheerleader outfit and green shoes. It wasn't just her outfit that changed either, as Helen herself got a minor facelift, and she no longer sported black and white hair, but now she's a blonde. Despite these changes, most animatronics just kept her concept unification look, though some would wear the cheer attire in years to come, which I'll mention later in the video. The walkarounds, on the other hand, were updated and a newer version of Helen would be created, except now Helen has blonde hair and the cheer outfit. This design of Helen would be one of the few things from the Disney era to stick around after the deal ended, and even to this day, most Chuck E. Cheese locations that have a Helen walkaround usually have a variation of this costume. As the 90s went on, Helen was represented on many items and merchandise. She actually got the most amount of merchandise than any other character besides Chucky. Again, CEC was really trying to market Helen towards young girls. But all this merchandise she got definitely makes up for her receiving none during the Pizza Time Theater days. She got many plushes based off her standard 90s outfit and her green cheerleader costume, along with figures and small appearances on parody posters and wall art inside of the restaurants. Not to mention character portraits. One really cool thing to come from the 90s was this Helen car ride. It's basically the exact same thing as the Chuck E. Cheese car ride that takes your photo, but this time it's Helen, though I'm not sure if this one actually took photos. I'm also not sure how many locations had this ride, but I do know that the Honolulu, Hawaii location has it, and the original Montford, Texas location did too, but there were definitely a few more. Also, while not CEC related, a Juan Poco chicken restaurant in San Bernardino, California, actually has this Helen ride in their restaurant. Crazy, right? The 1990s also brought in some new Helen cyberamics. These include the road stage, which featured a half-bodied Helen like what Pizza Time Theater had, as well as both the 2-stage and the 1-stage, featuring a full-bodied Helen. These Helens were pretty much the same as the rocker stage animatronics, but a little more advanced. Also, Helen got a new mask to match her redesign and to make her look younger, along with the addition of the pigtails. Some early versions of this stage gave Helen a microphone stand, but that didn't last too long. Some of the Helen animatronics from these stages were added to the pre-existing rocker stages, as the Helens from the rocker stages were beginning to be phased out by the mid to late 90s, due to the hanging swing mechanisms being a nightmare for technicians to repair. Unfortunately, this would be the last Helen animatronic figure ever created, as by 1996 CEC had something big up their sleeves. Something a little more 90s and futuristic. 1996 was a big year for the company, as Chuck E. Cheese was getting ready to celebrate its 20th anniversary the following year. One of the things that came from this anniversary hype was a brand new animatronic stage known as the Awesome Adventure Machine. This stage, while being amazing and epic, it only featured one animatronic, that being Chuck E. Cheese himself in the center. On the right and left sides of the stage, it had 2 large screens, and that's where the other characters, including Helen, were seen on. Helen and the other characters were portrayed by their walk-around counterparts, but there was something different about them. Beginning in July 1996, all of the characters in the show tapes featured articulated costumes. This would be the first and only articulated costume for Helen. The costume was pretty much the same as the standard walk-around costume, with the only difference being the articulated head, and Helen's eyes being much smaller, probably due to the mechanisms inside the heads. However, while these costumes were impressive and pretty cool, they didn't really move all that well. Like, Helen could barely move her mouth, making her look kinda creepy at times. Sadly, the awesome adventure machine was never mass-produced due to being too expensive and hard to maintain. So the company instead created another stage, but far less expensive and easier to maintain, Studio C, which also only featured Chucky as an animatronic. There were apparently plans to phase out all of Chucky's friends, including Helen, to only be replaced by a new character named Bird. This would ultimately never happen, thank God. Interestingly, on this concept art for the original Studio C, there's just a random picture of Helen. Was there a Studio C Helen in production at some point? Actually, there is a rumor that a 5-character Studio C was planned, but was cancelled for being too expensive. If that's actually true, then we were totally robbed of what could have been the best Chuck E. Cheese stage of all time. Oh well. Anyways, the articulated costumes remained in the show tapes, but soon Studio C had another unique feature not seen on stages with all 5 characters. That's brand new puppets. And while I do like the Studio C puppets, mostly for nostalgia reasons, I'm not a big fan of the Helen puppet. I don't think it's a bad puppet by any means. It's better than the 1991 puppet. It's just that there's something off about it. Maybe it's because this Helen is noticeably chubbier than Helen is supposed to be, or her limited head movement. I don't know, I'm just not a big fan of this Helen puppet. One last thing. So in 1999, Chuck E. Cheese signed a deal with a little-known company at the time called Funimation, yes, that Funimation, to produce a live-action Chuck E. Cheese movie using the articulated mascot costumes called Chuck E. Cheese and the Galaxy 5000. In the movie, the articulated Helen costume received a minor redesign. Her hair was now longer and was more orange than yellow. Also, her green and yellow cheer outfit was changed to a purple outfit, which debuted a few years earlier. This was done so Helen wouldn't blend in with the green screens used in the film. They also changed her eyeshadow color from green to purple for the same reason. Along with the articulated costume, a standard non-articulated Helen costume was also used for a few scenes. Interestingly, neither Carlissa McKinney or Anna Gray Labasse or any previous Helen voice actor reprised the role for Galaxy 5000. Instead, Helen was voiced by Georgia Denny, who, fun fact, not only provided Helen's speaking voice, but she also wore the Helen costume seen in the actual film, with additional costume work done by Linda Coleman. An additional voice actress, Heather Garner, provided the singing voice for Helen during her big musical number featured in the film.
Where do humans get off anyway, eating poor little defenseless birds? Are they crazy? Where would they be without their eggs for breakfast every morning? And how do they repay us? By giving us the deep fry? Oh!
Sometimes you seem so far away, even though you are near me.
So in 1999, Chuck E. Cheese and the Galaxy 5000 was released straight to video, and although it has been mostly forgotten, it does have its fans and has gained a cult following. However, not long after the film released, more changes would occur for both Chuck E. Cheese and Helen as we entered a new era for the company, one that many look back on fondly to this day.
How parents eat pizza. How you eat pizza. Chuck E. Cheese's. The real cool place to be a kid. Parents don't have to get it, they just have to help get you there.
2000 marked the beginning of a new millennium as well as a new era for Chuck E. Cheese's and its characters, as many changes were on the horizon, and those also included Helen. Welcome to the Avenger era. Helen changed quite a bit during this era, as she was now aged up to be slightly older than her Tux counterpart. Her personality and character traits also changed, as she became much wiser and would often give wisdom to her friends during a situation. This is also when the company really started to play up Helen's crush on Chucky, While this had been referenced before in the 90s, and especially in Galaxy 5000, the Avenger era was when Helen's crush became more apparent. She would often tease Chucky about it, which often resulted in Chucky being nervous, shying away, or changing the subject.
I think it's time we sang some songs together.
Together?
Yeah, you know, like a love song duet.
A love song? Hey, Jasper, didn't you have a song you wanted to sing right now?
Helen's overall design also changed. While she still mostly retained her late 90s design, the whole cheerleader aspect was dropped, and she now wears a white shirt with a red jacket, blue shorts, and red shoes. There was also another version of this design where Helen sports a red shirt and a blue skirt, and both of these designs would interchange with each other throughout the 2000s. Helen's personality and design weren't the only things to change during this era, as one more thing changed: her voice. Carlissa McKenney left in 2000, and Anna Gray LaBasse, who had been providing Helen's singing voice since 1992, officially became both the singing and the speaking voice of Helen, beginning in July 2000.
People they're saying that it's just a phase. They tell me to act my age. Well, I am.
As for the walk-around costumes, nothing changed. Well, kinda. The Helen costumes from the late 90s were still being used in both the show tapes and in the restaurants. They all still retained the cheerleader outfits, though the Helen featured in the show tapes began to use the purple cheer costume instead of the green one. The Studio C puppet also switched over to the purple cheer outfit in 2003. As for the animatronics, while they never really changed, they did see one major change. They finally got rid of that ugly latex Helen mask in the 2000s and replaced it with a plastic mask. This is the mask everyone is familiar with when it comes to 3-stage Helen. And while this mask is kinda creepy, especially when not maintained well, it's still better than the 90s latex mask. Around this time, some Helen bots also got yellow hair replacing the black and white 90s hair, though this was uncommon in most stores. In terms of other miscellaneous things about Avenger Helen, she did receive quite a bit of merchandise, but not as much as back in the 90s. She mostly received things like several types of plushes, and appeared on a few posters and decor found at the restaurants. Helen's walk-around costume also made a few appearances outside the restaurant. Now she did this in the 90s too, but it became more frequent in the 2000s. She appeared at a couple sporting events and several Chuck E. Cheese fan conventions like Cheesevention and ChuckyCon. And while Helen didn't appear in any commercials, she was animated on a few separate occasions in segments or show tapes. Finally, Helen made several video game appearances, including games like Chuck E. Cheese Party Games, Chuck E. Cheese Sports Games, and most notably, Chuck E. Cheese's Playhouse, which was a game definitely marketed towards girls, and Helen was pretty much the leading character of that game. One thing to mention regarding merchandise and artwork is that a lot of it featured what was a new design for Helen. She now has shorter pigtails with small blue bows, blue jeans, white shoes, and a pink long-sleeve shirt with a flower on it. This makes Helen the only character in the Avenger era to change hairstyles and clothing designs, and to my understanding, this design was only used in marketing and signage. Avenger Helen would go on to remain in the restaurants for many years before quietly being retired around 2014. But I want to backtrack for a moment because, as many CEC fans know, a few years earlier in 2012, something drastic and controversial happened. Something that would change the company and the characters forever.
When you come to Chuck E. Cheese's, you can see what's new.
New fun! New games! New cousins!
What's new?
New awesomeness!
Where a kid can be a kid.
Around mid-2012, CEC Entertainment introduced him, Rockstar Chuck E. Cheese. This was the brand new design of Chuck E. Cheese that would soon be at all locations. Now, the reason I say Rockstar Chuck is controversial is because when he was first introduced, the general public did not like this rodent and wanted nothing to do with him. But CEC didn't care what its customers thought about Rockstar and went ahead with replacing Avenger Chuck in every aspect of the business. Well, everything except for Chucky's friends. Yeah, for some reason, despite Chucky being redesigned, none of his friends changed their designs. The Avenger designs carried over to the Rockstar era, but that would change pretty soon. Throughout the rest of 2012, we still had Avenger Helen, but beginning in 2013, we would start to see some changes being made to Helen and the rest of Chucky's friends. For starters, a brand new puppet would be introduced into the Studio C show tapes, which would soon be phased out and show tapes would soon become standardized for any Chuck E. Cheese stage. I actually prefer this Helen puppet over the original Studio C one. I just think it looks better. But strangely enough, the Avenger Helen costumes were still being used in the show tape videos all the way up until 2014, when the puppets took over. Speaking of 2014, that's when Avenger Helen was officially retired and Rockstar Helen debuted. Rockstar Helen saw the biggest change the character received since the 90s. She is a bit more youthful, and now more closely resembles Rockstar Chucky in terms of the overall design. Her hair is now in a ponytail instead of pigtails, and they brought back her pink eyeshadow look. Her wings are also a little more defined than before. Helen also received a brand new outfit consisting of a pink striped dress with blue linings and a blue ribbon tied around her waist. She was also now wearing blue jeans under her dress and had pink shoes. Oh, did I mention that she's CGI now? Also during this era, Helen adopted a loyal and positive personality who is kind to all her friends. She does still have a crush on Chucky, but it's not as prominent as before. She is also known for taking piano lessons from Munch, reading, and oh yeah, she's now a gamer, and she won't let anyone forget that. Helen also has a different backstory on how she met Chucky and the gang. Originally, she met Chucky as a solo singer trying to make it big. Now she joins Chucky's band after he spots her singing while gaming. Talk about a downgrade. Even though Helen got redesigned, she never received a mascot costume based on the new look, and the animatronics didn't get updated clothing. Most locations that had a Helen costume still continued to use it alongside the Rockstar Chucky costume. Even some locations to this day still use the Tux and Avenger versions of Helen. Interestingly, around 2016 and 2017, CEC started using a weird prototype Rockstar Helen suit. It consisted of the head of Avenger Helen, but had a new clothing look similar to Rockstar Helen. Thankfully it wasn't used much, probably because of how cursed it looked, and only appeared for corporate events and one-off public appearances. Also in 2016 we got a new Helen puppet, which is actually based off Rockstar Helen. It looks pretty good and honestly looks better than the CGI design. This puppet would be the basis for all future Helen puppets going further, only receiving minor tweaking to the design. This design is still being used today in all CEC videos that feature the puppets. An example being a set of shorts from 2019 called Bright Side with Helen, where Helen would give some advice on turning negative moments into something positive. 2016 would also mark a sad occasion and the end of an era for Helen, as she was about to get a new voice actor. Anna Gray Labassi, who had been voicing Helen on and off for about 20 years, left the role in February 2016 to focus on her music career. Starting in March 2016, Helen would now be voiced by Caroline Richardson. She gave Helen a much more youthful voice that matches her current, more youthful design.
Do you ever get sad when you run out of your favorite snack? Look on the bright side. You have other healthy things you can eat which are good for you.
In 2017, we would finally see a brand new Helen mascot costume created, also created by Cowan Costumes. This Helen costume ditched the classic head that was used since 1991 in favor of a brand new head that's closer to her CGI Rockstar look. And while I do like this costume, there is something off about it. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but I think it might have to do with the head. I'm pretty sure Cowan Costumes used the same head mold for the Chucky costume, but modified it to become Helen. It doesn't quite look right. The rest of the costume is fine though. This costume debuted at the opening of the very first Chuck E. Cheese remodeled test location, also known as the Abomination, aka Chuck E. Cheese 2.0, in San Antonio, Texas. Unfortunately, not many locations actually have this costume, but she is a bit more common than the rest of the non-Chucky side characters. As for other things involving Helen in the Rockstar era, since we're still in the era, she hasn't done much, but there is still a lot to talk about. For example, Helen got a bunch of new merchandise like t-shirts, stickers, the squishy head thing, cups, posters, figures, whatever this thing is, and a variety of plushies, like small ones, big ones, small ones with big heads, and a few variants. And even though they are not Rockstar related, I wanted to give a mention to the new Helen merchandise based off her 90s design, like the U2's plush and the bobblehead based off the Cyberamic. Rockstar Helen also had a few video game appearances, like Chuck E. Cheese Racing World and Chuck E. Cheese's Party Galaxy. Fun fact about that one, that was actually my first exposure to the Rockstar versions of Chucky's Friends. The design for Helen in that game is slightly different than the current design, so maybe it's an earlier design. Finally, I can't forget to mention the upcoming Chucky and Friends animated series coming out later this year. This series gives all the characters redesigns to make them unique for the series. Helen for the most part remains the same as her current design, with the only difference being her outfit. She is now wearing a pink hoodie with a pink skirt instead of her traditional striped dress. I'm curious if the designs of the characters from this series will eventually replace the current designs of the characters in the restaurants, similar to what happened with the Great Wolf Lodge characters. Only time will tell. As for the Helen costume, while she hasn't appeared in many store locations, she does sometimes get rented out for grand reopenings of store locations or for local events. She was also used in the Chuck E. Cheese Summer Concert Tour a few years back, a few fan conventions, and just recently Chuck E. Cheese has begun to use the costumes in show tapes and music videos again. I also want to mention the commercial for Chuck E. Cheese Racing World, as that also featured the Helen costume. It kinda reminded me of the old Nintendo KCL Productions commercials. And that brings us to today. As of 2025, Rockstar Helen is the current Helen design used by Chuck E. Cheese. But we aren't quite done with talking about Helen just yet, as there's still another chapter. In this next chapter, I will be discussing Helen costume variants, as well as animatronic variants. And let me just say, my god, there's a lot, so strap in. Real quick, before I talk about variants, I want to mention a few of Helen's cameos in pop culture outside of Chuck E. Cheese. Helen has been referenced and has had a few cameos on shows such as The Simpsons, Regular Show, Robot Chicken, and in the background of an SNL skit. Probably the most well-known Helen reference is Chica from Five Nights at Freddy's. Given that they're both animatronic chickens in pizza restaurants, it's safe to say Chica was inspired by Helen in some ways. As for variants, I'm going to start with animatronic variants. I'll do general designs first before mentioning outfit variants later. First up, as we all know, the 3-stage Helen originally had a creepy latex mask before switching to the plastic one, but surprisingly some locations actually kept the latex mask. For example, the last American location with the latex Helen mask was in Altoona, Pennsylvania, who removed it in 2012. Other Helen animatronics were known to have different eye colors as well as different eyeshadow colors. Some even had glitter or some kind of sparkly material on them. As for more drastic variants specific to locations, the Helen bot at the Billings, Montana location had unique legs that were very fuzzy. Madison, Wisconsin's Helen had unique hands as those were actually Pasquale's hands painted white. The Chesapeake, Virginia location had one of the last 1990s Helen masks up until they got 2.0. A similar mask was also found at the Albemarle Road, North Carolina location. On the topic of masks, I gotta give a shout out to Moldy Queen Helen from the Annapolis, Maryland location. This bot got her name from the mask getting moldy from a leak above the stage, dripping onto the mask. However, she has since been fixed and is cleaned up and is no longer moldy. Well, for the most part. The last thing to mention is the Chico, California location, as that was the last store to feature Helen with a mic stand that was originally part of the 2-stage. One of the more common variants found on Helen animatronics and walkarounds is different hair colors. While most locations stuck to keeping Helen's traditional black and white 90s hair, other locations changed her hair, I guess to either keep up with times or to just be unique. The most common of these variants is Helen with yellow hair. As early as the mid-1990s, Helen was given yellow hair at a few locations, such as Mobile, Alabama and Metairie, Louisiana. Other locations to feature Helen with yellow hair included Staten Island, New York, Tampa, Florida, aka Carrollwood, Huntsville, Alabama, and the Legacy store in Charlotte, North Carolina, also known as Pineville. I should also mention the Helen animatronic at Chuck E. Cheese's headquarters in Department 18, the one used to program shows, as she also has yellow hair too. Other hair variants include this bizarre hair variant from the Pensacola, Florida location where Helen had yellow pigtails but the top of her hair was still black and white, as well as Helen's orange hair from Wilmington, North Carolina, Glen Burnie, Maryland's weird short white and pink hair, Irving, Texas's Helen with yellow and white hair from the 90s, and North Dartmouth, Massachusetts Helen with hair that, while looks similar to the standard 90s hair, is a bit more feathery. The last variants to talk about regarding the animatronics is the different outfits Helen has worn throughout the years. Warning, there's a lot. So much I can't mention all of them, but here's a few I was able to find. Most Helen animatronics with yellow hair were also given her green cheerleader outfit to match her 90s look. Locations previously mentioned like Mobile, Huntsville, and Metairie all had the outfit along with a couple others. The Cantagello Chili location previously had the cheer outfit on their Helen One Stage Cyberamics several years ago. Other outfits include the bandstand outfit with the rock shirt and star earrings, this red shirt from the old Ogden, Utah location, Helen's roller skater outfit from the Irving, Texas location, which was used from 1992 to 2002, this green basketball outfit from the Fargo, North Dakota location, and Helen's unique pink shoelaces from the North Dartmouth store. I also want to mention the old Guatemala City 3-stage Helen, who had a unique version of her standard 90s outfit, and once wore a red dress. This animatronic actually still exists as after the location closed, Helen along with the rest of the bots were put on display at the new location. Finally, we have a selection of Christmas outfits from different stores, such as this one from Whitehall, Pennsylvania, a couple from the old Shiny Happy Danvers, Massachusetts location, and the best one of them all. I don't know if this is creative or cursed, but we have Gingerbread Helen from the Deptford, New Jersey location. And since I didn't know where else to put this segment, I'm putting it here. We have a couple road stage box variants. The Sun Valley, California road stage had Helen with a black box, and the Hialeah, Florida location originally had Helen with a blue box, but later switched to a pink one. Moving on from the animatronics, now I'm going to mention some walk-around costume alternative outfits. Again, there's no way I'll be able to mention all of them in this video. There's even more for the costume than the animatronics, so I'll just mention some of my favorites and some I found while researching. Quick note here, while some are official, most of these Helen variant outfits are custom made by fans. A good chunk of these are from the well-known Chuck E. Cheese fan and fandom member Emily Sullivan, who is hands down a top 10 Helen performer. Maybe even top 5. Firstly, just like the animatronics, many Helen costumes feature different colored eyes, different colored eyeshadow, and different hair colors like orange, yellow, and black and white. As an example, here's a Helen with all white hair from the Paducah, Kentucky location. Different countries that have Chuck E. Cheese locations often have unique Helen costumes, but they all share one thing in common. They all have the green cheerleader outfit, but different hairstyles and colors. Dubai's Helen has flatter hair. Mexican Helen has longer and fluffier hair. Guam had Helen with orange hair, and also had the same yellow hair as the previous two. And finally, Hawaii's Helen was identical to the others in terms of hair, but at least she had some nice Christmas outfits. Speaking of Christmas, Helen has quite a few of those too. Here's a winter outfit used in a show tape from around 1999. And here's a more modern winter outfit. Here she is in an elf-inspired outfit. And finally, one of my favorites is this one from the Bayman location. Before I speedrun the rest of the costume variants, I want to bring up this cursed Rockstar Avenger hybrid costume used prior to the official Rockstar Helen costume debut. Some of these look okay, while others... yeah, let's move on. Finally, I want to bring up the custom outfits and a few show tape outfits, such as this outfit for the music video of the song, Chucky, Helen wearing all black behind the scenes, and her sprinter outfit. I will now speedrun the rest of the outfits. Some are from ChuckyCon 2018 and 2019, while others appeared in some store locations. The con outfits include her Turn the Beat Around, her outfits from Burning Love, Keep on Smiling, and She's Got the Look. There's also a custom version of her later Avenger costume with the pink shirt, a custom Skater Helen outfit, and this really cool outfit based off her original prototype Cheer outfit. The final outfits to bring up include Helen as a witch, Helen with turquoise legs, Wonder Helen, 4th of July Helen, what I think is either a karate, disco, or MC Hammer Helen, and Princess Helen. There's also this. Why do I always have to end on a cursed outfit? And on that note, this officially concludes the history and evolution of Helen Henny. And there you have it, the history of Helen Henny from Chuck E. Cheese's. I cannot wait to see what the company has in mind next for this character. Hopefully it will be something good. Let me know if I missed any Helen costumes, animatronics, or general info, cause I know I definitely missed a few. Before I end this video, I just want to say I am very sorry this video took so freaking long to release. I originally planned for it to release last year, but due to work on other videos, having a hard time researching, and hitting roadblocks, experiencing burnout, having to take many breaks, and like 100 other things, that's why it's taken so long. I promise to do better when releasing new videos. I'm at least thankful I got this one released, and I can't wait to work on the rest of the series as well as any other future videos I have in mind right now. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section down below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below and tell me what's your favorite version of Helen Henny. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on the History of series. Bye bye!
Hang on, let me kick this pedal in. Woo! Yeah, baby!
I want you to want me. I need you to need me. I love you to love me. I'm begging you to beg me. I want you to want me. I need you to need me. I love you to love me. I'll shut up my high heel shoes, put on a brand new shirt, get home early from work. If you say that you love me, did I see you crying? Did I see you crying? Did I see you crying? Feeling alone without a friend, you know you feel like dying. Did I see you crying? I want you to want me.
I want you to
I
want me.
need you to
I
need me.
need you to need me.
I love you to love
I
me.
love you to love me.
I'm begging you to beg me.
To beg me.
I'll shine out my high heel shoes, put on a brand new shirt. I'll get home early from work. If you say that you love me, did I see you crying? Did I see you crying? Did I see you crying? Oh, feeling alone without a friend, you know I feel like dying. Oh, did I see you crying?
Check it out, man. I want to tear this up, baby.
I want you to want me. I need you to need me. I love you to love me. I'm begging you to beg me. I want you to want me.
You do?
I want you to want me.
Kind of uncomfortable.
I want you to want me.
Well, Helen.
I want you to want me.
You know what I just realized? Helen is a chicken, right? But Chuck E. Cheese also sells chicken. That doesn't make any sense. Why would Helen be okay with Chucky selling chicken in the restaurant when she's right there? Unless there's something about Helen that we don't know. You know what? I should probably just end the video right now before I overthink things.